Welcome. I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of the Unpopular Podcast. It's your boy, Jalen. And if you would do me a favor, please subscribe to wherever you're listening. Please subscribe to wherever you're watching. If you're not watching the YouTube or not subscribed to the YouTube, come over to the YouTube. I want you to get the full visual experience, and please subscribe. It would definitely mean a lot to me. Last episode, I did the men's bracket for the NCAA tournament, and you guys really enjoyed it. I had a lot of feedback. A lot of people said my picks were wrong. Hell, my bracket, the tournament started, 2 days ago? My bracket's already busted because I had Michigan State beating UCLA. It is what it is. But a lot of you guys enjoyed that. And a lot of you guys also said that you wanted to see me do the women's side of the bracket or the women's bracket. And hey, I'll do it. I enjoy doing the men's side. I'll do the women's side today. But before we do that, the NCAA is already behind the eight ball as far as they already don't pay their athletes. They already don't. They make billions upon billions off of these athletes, whether it's basketball, whether it's football, whether it's any sport. The NCAA makes billions of dollars off these athletes, and they don't pay them. Now, a lot of people say, well, they get free tuition, they get per diem, they get to travel. You think all that money, that whatever you're saying, the free tuition, even though most of the kids don't stay for the whole thing, if they're good enough to go pro, the per diem, that's usually about $50 for an entire week trip to go get food or something like that. You think that that's worth the same amount of money that Zion Williamson brings to the school, or the South Carolina women's basketball team brings to the school? I say that to say this before we even touch on this bracket that we're going to do today. The videos have come out about the huge discrepancies between how the NCAA men are being treated as in the I guess the tournament bubble, and how the women are being treated. The practice facilities or the lack of practice facilities for the women, the food for the women compared to the food for the men. And of course, you hear the NCAA saying is due to space. They didn't have enough space, even though you found enough space for the men, but you did not find enough space for the women. Spoiler alert, I don't know if you really knew this, but there's a lot, and I mean a whole hell of a lot, of players and women teams that are better than men's teams. I'm almost sure the women's NCAA tournament will be more exciting. Well, you'll see better basketball, and there'll be more stories and excitement from the women's side than the men's side this year. Hell, I've said this entire year that the college basketball on the men's side has been down the entire year. Hell, Duke's not in the tournament. Kentucky's not in the tournament. North Carolina's an 8th seed. It's been down. What I have said, however, is that it has not been down for the women's side. You see teams like Florida Gulf Coast that we'll talk about today. They've been great. Maryland's been great. Stanford's been great. Louisville's been great. Uconn's been great. Georgia, South Carolina, UCLA, Baylor. Like, there's been so many great women's teams, yet and still they're treated like they're treated in this NCAA bubble. A bubble, by the way, that a lot of people still don't think should happen due to the fact that there's still a virus going on. So all I'm saying is this. We know that people view men and women differently. They shouldn't. It is highly unfair to women, especially women in sports, whether playing the sport or covering the sport. There's definitely a discrepancy of how we view women compared to men. Get it right, NCAA. That is unfair treatment that you have the men's side being treated 10 times better than the women's side. And quiet as it's kept, a lot of the women teams bring more money to the organization and bring more money to the school than the men's. Get it right, NCAA. That's all I'm going to say about it. Get it right. But let's move forward. Like I said, last episode, I did the men's side of the bracket. In this episode, I'll do the women's side. I watch a lot of sports. I watch a lot of college basketball, both men and women. And this year is very exciting, especially on the women's side, because there's a lot of good teams. And there's a lot of good teams that you wouldn't expect to be that good. Like, I wouldn't expect Kent, Michigan to be good, or High Point to be good, or Wright State, but they're good and they made it to the tournament. And now, of course, a lot of these games or a lot of these teams dealt with games getting canceled or games getting postponed or people getting COVID. But the fact that they were able to persevere and get to March is a testament to not only the team, but the athletes themselves being able to. I understand. I mean, I was a college athlete. I understand how tough it is to, especially when you have to go by a whole bunch of guidelines, but nobody else on campus has to. So shouts out to the women and shouts out to the men for making it to March and making it to an entire season. But for the women's side, you have, of course, 4 regions. The regions are broken up. You have the Alamo region, you have the Riverwalk region, you have the Hemisphere region, and you have the Mercado region. And the number one overalls in each region, the Alamo is Stanford, Riverwalk is Uconn, Hemisphere is South Carolina, and Mercado is NC State. So like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the bracket and tell you who I think is going to win. Like I said, the women's side starts tomorrow, so it's perfect timing. I'm excited. And I'm excited to see there's a lot of even matchups. That this bracket, in preparation to do this episode, it was a lot harder than the men's side because there's so many good teams on the women's side that it's just like, well, damn, like if they win like this, it's not really upset, but they could, it was tough. But let's start with the Alamo side. You have Stanford, which is number 1, going against number 16, Utah Valley. Stanford's been pretty good all year. Like yes, they are. They're 25-2, and to me, it's hard to, like I said, there's only been, I don't see a 16 be upsetting a 1 in this scenario. Stanford has been incredible this entire year. Not to mention, you still have Kiana Williams and Haley Jones, like both of them and they're not. I just don't see, especially if one of those two are hot, I don't see a Utah Valley beating them. Not to mention, Stanford's averaging, 78 points a game compared to Utah Valley's 63, I think. I just think the firepower as well as the defense that Stanford brings is going to be too much for Utah Valley. So I have Stanford beating Utah Valley. You have Oklahoma State against Wake Forest. I think Oklahoma State, they have better wins. You have a win against Iowa State. You have a win against Texas. You have a win against West Virginia. Not to mention they average more points and their defense a little better. Their opponents average less points than Wake Forest. Not to mention Wake Forest is 12-12. I just think the experience that Oklahoma State has will kind of overpower Wake Forest in this scenario. So I have Oklahoma State beating Wake Forest. Missouri State against UC Davis. Again, it goes back to I just think when you're 21, and you're going to see this a lot in this entire bracket, in this entire tournament, is due to COVID, there's a lot of teams that have more wins and more games in general than others. I just think the fact that Missouri State has 21 wins to UC Davis 13, I just think the experience in playing more games is going to do better for them than it would for having 13. They both only lost 2 games, but like I said, you have almost 10 more games than UC Davis. So I have Missouri State beating UC Davis. You have Arkansas against Wright State. To me, the records are kind of even. You have 19-8 against 18-7. But I just think Arkansas State to me is in another class than Wright State. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Arkansas is in another class than Wright State. Don't get me wrong. Wright State deserves to be here, of course, because they had a good season, especially seeing everything that went on. But I just think that Arkansas to me is on another class, and because of that, I have Arkansas beating Wright State. You have Oregon against South Dakota. To me, this goes to the talent that you played. Oregon has played UC Davis and they played Oregon State. However, South Dakota has played South Dakota State. They've played Oklahoma. They played Gonzaga, and they played South Carolina. The difference is, of course, they've lost all those games. While South Dakota has more wins. I mean, 19-5 to 13-8. I think that they've lost. Those 5 losses were against teams that they would see or would be in the tournament. And I think that yes, Oregon only has 13 wins to 8 losses, which is a lot of losses. But I think they've beaten higher caliber play. Like I said, they've beaten an Oregon State, even though they did lose twice. They beat a UC Davis, who's in the tournament. So I have Oregon winning. It's tough, like I said, because I realized it was hard to evaluate a lot of these teams because of the record and because of who they played and because of COVID and everything. But I just think that Oregon has played better competition than a South Dakota. So that's why I have Oregon moving on. You have Georgia and Drexel. I really can't. I mean, I can't say much. You have Gabby Conley. Georgia to me is a team that could. I'll tell you what I have, but Georgia's a team that could win it all. So. And I don't think Drexel has the firepower and the defense to withstand the onslaught that they can get from a Georgia. So I got Georgia winning that pretty easily. You have Northwestern and UCF. I'm going to go with Northwestern. I think they average nearly 10 more points than UCF, and while their opponents score more than UCF, they played better opponents. Like they played Michigan, they played Ohio State, they played Iowa, and they played Nebraska, and then UCF has played South Florida, Houston, LSU, and Temple. I just think that Northwestern has played better players. So while their opponents score more, they score nearly 10 more points than UCF. So I have Northwestern beating UCF, and then you have Louisville against Marset? Yeah, no. Louisville. Louisville. It's you have Dana Evans. It's Louisville. So moving forward, let's go over to the Riverwalk side. You have Uconn against High Point. I just think Uconn, to me, has better players. They have the better coach, even though Gene Oriyama, I don't think he's going to coach the first maybe 2 games due to COVID. But I just think you have better players. I mean, Uconn has the players. Like, you have Paige Buckner, you have Crystal Williams. I don't see High Point stopping UConn. They're number one they're the number 1 ranked on the Riverwalk for a reason. So I got Utah beating that. You have Syracuse against South Dakota State. I just think that this is what I was talking about earlier, as far as there's a lot of good teams, and a lot of teams will lose that. I have South Dakota State. South Dakota State, they have more wins. Let's see. Syracuse has only played, well, they're 14-8, and San Diego State, no, I'm sorry, South Dakota State is 21-3. They average less points, but they hold their opponents to fewer points. So I just think South Dakota State is going to be a little too much, especially inside and from shooting the ball deep, than Syracuse. So I have South Dakota State being Syracuse. You have Iowa against Kent, Michigan. I have Iowa. I mean, when you have Caitlin Clark, who's leading the entire NCAA in scoring as far as women's, in scoring with 27 points a game, that's a handful in of itself. She's pretty much, I don't know about her draft stock or anything like that, but when we talk about college basketball, she kind of has that Cade Cunningham effect, as far as if Cade Cunningham's on fire, then you have a really good chance of winning. And if Caitlin Clark is on fire, Iowa has a really good chance of winning. I mean, Iowa scores 87 points a game pretty much, and she is a big part of that. And I just don't see a Kent, Michigan, or Central Michigan, I'm sorry. I don't see Central Michigan being able to keep up with that. So because of that, I have Iowa winning. You have Kansas and Idaho State. You have Kentucky and Idaho State. Yeah, man, I gotta go. And this is the thing, man. I'm gonna go with Kentucky due to the fact that they've played tougher opponents. They played Georgia, they played Tennessee, they played Alabama, they played Arkansas, they played Mississippi. And while Idaho State has more wins, I mean, they're 22-3. Your notable wins is Idaho and Montana State, two teams of which that aren't in the national or aren't in the tournament. So I just think because you're in the SEC, which is Kentucky, you automatically are going to play bigger and better teams. And yes, you're 14-8, but I have 17-8. I have Kentucky winning. So I have Kentucky beating Idaho State. You have Michigan against Florida Gulf Coast. To me, I think it kind of goes back, and it kind of sounds contradictory, but hear me out. Yes, Michigan is in the Big Ten. You play Ohio State. You play Northwestern. You play Maryland, and you should be better than a Florida Gulf Coast. However, Florida Gulf Coast is 26-2, and they average more points and hold their opponents to less points than Michigan. Yes, they haven't played the same caliber, but when you've played 14, when you have 14 wins to 26 wins, and you're scoring 82 points a game, that's kind of hard. I kind of can't overlook that. So I have to pick Florida Gulf Coast over Michigan. I understand Michigan's ranked 6th and Florida Gulf Coast is ranked 11th, but I have to pick. I mean, I can't really see myself looking at that. I have to go with Florida Gulf Coast. Now, I understand anyone can get hot, and Michigan might have better players, but as a better team, I got to go with Florida Gulf Coast. You have Tennessee against Middle Tennessee. Again, Tennessee arguably could have the number 1 overall draft pick in next year's draft. So I just don't see. Yeah, Middle Tennessee averages more points, but Tennessee really isn't a scoring juggernaut as much as they are defensively. Yeah, they average 72 points a game, which is a lot of points. But I think that their defense is going to be too much, and their size. Tennessee is a huge team, and I just think that Middle Tennessee just won't be able to. I think they're gonna lose the rebounding game, and I think they're gonna lose the paint game. So I have Tennessee beating Middle Tennessee. You have Virginia Tech and Marquette. I have Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is just, I mean, that is a scoring team. When you average 73 points a game, and Virginia Tech, they light it up. Like they shoot deep a lot. And it's a smaller team, but it's a fast team. Virginia Tech kind of reminds me of the men's Houston team. So Houston, they're not the biggest team, but they run, and when they run, they shoot a lot, and that's what Virginia Tech does. So I got Virginia Tech beating Marquette. You got number 2 Baylor against Jackson State. Shouts out to Jackson State, being what HBCU making it. I know NC State's in this as well, but nah, they're not. I don't see them beating Baylor. Baylor averages almost 20 more points than them. I don't see it. Not to mention, Baylor's number 2 for a reason. Baylor, they have big wins against West Virginia, against Iowa State, against Texas, against Oklahoma State, and against South Florida. So I just think Baylor's another team that could win it all. Shouts out to Jackson State, of course, for making it to the tournament, but I just don't see them being able to withstand the onslaught that Baylor is going to bring their way. So yeah, I got Baylor winning that. Let's move down to the Hemisphere region. You have number 1 South Carolina against Mercer. It's South Carolina. I just don't. When you have Victoria Saxton, no. It's Victoria Saxton is one of the best players in college basketball. So I just don't think. Again, there's no Mercer is not going to upset a number 1 South Carolina. So nah. You have Oregon State against Florida State. I got Oregon State. To me, both of them have been good. They haven't been great though. Oregon State is 11-7. Florida State is 10-8. While that's cool. To me, that's not really gangbuster or anything. And Oregon State's best wins are UCLA and Oregon. And Florida State's best wins are Louisville, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, and Wake Forest. I just think Oregon State, to me, is a little better than Florida State. So I have Oregon State moving on. You have Georgia Tech and SF Austin, or South Florida, something like that. Austin. Even though they're ranked 12th and Georgia Tech kind of has played better teams, I can't see. I think the discrepancy of games is huge. You have 9 more games. You've won 9 more games than Georgia Tech. I think SF Austin is a little better than. Not a little. I think they're better than Georgia Tech, and I think that their size and their ability to score the ball, seeing as though they average 81 points a game, I got SF Austin beating Georgia Tech. You have West Virginia and Lehigh. I have West Virginia. I don't think Lehigh. No, I don't really see it. Lehigh's best wins is Bucknell. And they lost to Bucknell 3 or 4 times, and Boston University. I don't think Lehigh will be able to withstand the scoring power that West Virginia has. So I have West Virginia winning that. You have Texas and Bradley. Again, it's Texas. I don't see Bradley being able to keep up with the talent that Texas has. While Bradley does average more points a game, they play teams like Drake in Northern Iowa. Not saying they're bad teams, but when you compare that to Texas's schedule, and they have to play Iowa State and Oklahoma and Texas Tech, I think that Texas just has better players. So I have Texas beating Bradley. UCLA against Wyoming. I have UCLA winning. UCLA is one of those dark horse teams for me that could win. They have some pretty big wins. They beat Stanford. They beat Washington State. They beat Arizona. I just think UCLA has, they could win, especially when you have Michelle, what's her name? Anywhere. I know I butchered your name. I apologize. But Michelle Anywhere, I forgot her name. That's her name. I just butchered it. But she's one of the better players in the country. So I have UCLA beating Wyoming. When you have Alabama against North Carolina, this kind of hurts because I'm a North Carolina fan, but North Carolina's 13-10, and it goes back to the caliber of player. And the caliber of teams. I know you beat Virginia Tech, you beat Georgia Tech, you beat NC State, and Alabama's best wins is Houston, Oklahoma State, LSU, and they lost 3 times to South Carolina, but that's South Carolina. I just think, actually, you know what? No, I'm changing my mind. I got North Carolina beating Alabama. I got North Carolina beating Alabama. I'm going with it. I'm going with it. And then you got Maryland against Mount St. Mary's. The Mount. No. Maryland is the best offensive team in this entire is the best women's offensive team in the entire sport. So I know Mount St. Mary's cannot keep up with Maryland. So I got Maryland winning that fairly easily, actually. Then you got the Mercado. You got NC State against NC A&T. Shouts out to North Carolina A&T for being HBCU to make it to the NCAA tournament. But no, I don't think that you have the talent to keep up with NC State. I just, Kayla Jones, Jackie Brown Turner. No. So I have NC State winning that fairly easily. You have Florida or South Florida against Washington State. I got South Florida. Washington State is one game above 500. And while South Florida is 18-3, to me, they have better wins, and it's just a better team altogether. They're better defensively, and in fact, I think that they're one of the best scoring defensive teams in the entire league. So, I don't know. I just think that I think South Florida has better players than Washington State. So I have I have South Florida winning that. You have Gonzaga against Belmont. Both records are kind of similar, 23-3 to 20-5. However, Gonzaga has played people like BYU and South Carolina and South Dakota and South Dakota State. And while you lost to South Dakota State and South Carolina, those are better competition than a UT Martin and a Marquette. So I have Gonzaga beating Belmont. Indiana against VCU. I got Indiana winning. VCU is 16-10. Indiana is 18-5. I just think I think Indiana, their scoring power is, to me, a little better than VCU. So in fact, a little. They average 11 more points than VCU. I didn't mean a little. My fault. So I have Indiana beating VCU. You have Rutgers against BYU. I have Rutgers winning because I think Rutgers is one of those teams as well that a lot of these teams is like this, but Rutgers especially, if they get hot, especially from deep, it's tough to beat them. And I just don't. I understand. I think this is one of those matchups. Out of all the first round matchups, I think Rutgers and BYU might be the closest as far as it's like style against style. BYU is more of a defensive team, while Rutgers they can light that joint up. So, but I have Rutgers winning. I think I don't know. Let me say this. Because of BYU's defense, I don't think Rutgers would be able to have an incredible scoring night, but I do think that they won't be stopped scoring. And because of that, I don't think BYU can keep up scoring-wise with Rutgers. So I have Rutgers winning. Arizona against Stony Brook. Actually, it's funny, man. I think this is an upset to me. I have Stony Brook beating Arizona. I know Arizona averages more points. I know that, but Stony Brook is fourth in the nation in scoring defense. They average, their opponents only average 51 points a game or something like that. I think this will be a huge upset. I think Stony Brook can slow down Arizona's shooting attack, and as we've seen, and of course they're different and better teams, but when you saw Arizona against a team like Stanford, which is a defensive team, they just couldn't keep up, and I think Stony Brook's defense will be able to slow Arizona down. So I have Stony Brook beating Arizona in an upset. 14 beating a 3. You have Iowa State against Michigan State. I have Michigan State, honestly. I know Iowa State is better as far as record-wise. But I have Michigan State. I think Michigan State, their defense, to me, I think this is an evenly matched game as well, but I just pick Michigan State, I think Michigan State will be able to win. And Texas A&M against Troy. Let's keep it moving. I don't see Troy standing a chance against Texas A&M. So let's go back to the Alamo side. You have Stanford against Oklahoma State. I mean they're number one for a reason, and I think that Stanford is just, especially when we talk about until you get to like the 2 and 3 ranked teams, I think Stanford's just in another class. So I have Stanford beating Oklahoma State. Missouri State against Arkansas. I have Missouri State. Again, it goes back to, wait, no, I don't. Never mind. I'm sorry. I apologize. I have Arkansas. Arkansas scores almost 8 more points than them. Averages 8 more points than them, and Arkansas is one of those teams that if they're hot, it's a wrap for you. So I got Arkansas. You have Oregon against Georgia. Again, it's Georgia. Georgia's length is incredible. It's kind of like on the same type of length as Tennessee. Like they're a big team, and they have smaller guards, but their guards are quick and can shoot. So I just, it's tough. It's tough. So I mean, not to mention if Gabby Connolly gets hot, it's a wrap. So I have Georgia beating Oregon. Northwestern against Louisville. I have Louisville winning. Louisville is on another level, in my opinion, than Northwestern. They averaged 11 more points than them. It's Louisville. I have Louisville winning. Move over to the Riverwalk when you have Uconn against South Dakota State. Uconn, that's not that hard. You have Iowa against Kentucky. I have Iowa because, like I said, Iowa is the second ranked offense in the entire NCAA as far as the women's side. They average 87 points a game, and like I said, when you have that type of scoring power, not to mention their size, that's a pretty big team. It's kind of like the men's Iowa. The only difference is their star player isn't a big man. So I think Iowa's offense is just going to be a little too much for Kentucky. Florida Gulf Coast and Tennessee. Here's another upset. I have Florida Gulf Coast beating Tennessee. Yes, Tennessee is a huge team, and they like to feast on the inside game. But Florida Gulf Coast, like I said, they're a fast team, and their defense is better than Tennessee. Not to mention, I mean, they have I think they have a top 15 ranked defense in the entire nation, and their offense, they average 10 more points than Tennessee. I just think this is another upset. I have Florida Gulf Coast beating Tennessee. So and don't get me wrong, I understand Tennessee possibly has better players, but I think the momentum that Florida Gulf Coast is going to have after beating someone like a Michigan, and not to mention they can kind of run up and down the floor like they're a track star type team, and Tennessee is more of a half court team. I just have Florida Gulf Coast beating Tennessee. And Virginia Tech against Baylor. I mean, I have Baylor. I have Baylor winning. I don't think anybody on Tennessee. I don't think anybody in Virginia Tech will be able to go against Nalissa Smith. It's tough. So I have Baylor winning that. Let's go down to the hemisphere. South Carolina against Oregon State. I have South Carolina. They're one of the best teams in the entire nation. I just don't see it. UCF against West Virginia. I have West Virginia. I think while UCF beats Georgia Tech, I don't think they have better players than West Virginia, and I think West Virginia's talent will kind of West Virginia can definitely shoot the jump from deep when you have Chrissy Gundrisic. I know I said your name wrong. I apologize, but she can light it up. So I have West Virginia beating that. UCLA against Texas. I have UCLA winning. UCLA to me has better players than Texas, even though Texas has played better competition. I think UCLA wins this. North Carolina against Maryland. Again, Maryland is the best offensive team in the entire tournament, in the entire nation, actually. I don't think Maryland is going to lose to a North Carolina. So, yeah. When you go to Mercado, NC State against South Florida, I have NC State winning that. I kind of actually have NC State winning that kind of handedly. I just think NC State, especially when we talk about the scoring that they can put on somebody, I just don't think South Florida can maintain. When you have Gonzaga against Indiana, I have Gonzaga winning that. Gonzaga's tough, man. Gonzaga's a tough team, and they're more of a defensive team, of course, more than scoring. But I just think they can slow down an Indiana team, so I have Gonzaga beating Indiana. Stony Brook against Rutgers, I have Rutgers winning that. To me, top to bottom, they're better than Stony Brook. They're better than Stony Brook at what Stony Brook does best, which is defense and transition points. So I have Rutgers beating Stony Brook. And Michigan State against Texas A&M. I have Texas A&M winning that. Again, Kayla Wells is one of the best players in the entire NCAA. So I just, I don't think Michigan State has much to combat with that. So yeah. Move back up to the Alamo. You have Stanford against Arkansas. This, once we start getting to the Sweet 16s and the Elite Eights and Final Fours, this is when the players, like the star players or the all-around teams come out. Like you see Cinderella stories, but if you look at most of the tournament champions or most of the people that make it this far, they usually have a star player. This is where the Brittany Griners come out. This is where the Diana Taurasi's, the Candace Parkers, the Sue Birds. This is what's her name? Skylar Diggins when she was in college. This is when you start to see greatness. So with that being said, when you have Stanford against Arkansas, I don't see Arkansas being able to stop Haley Jones or Kiana Williams. I just don't see it. I'm not saying that they can't make it a game, but those are top players. And I didn't even mention Aston Pritchell. Pritchell. I'm sorry. So I have Stanford winning that. In Georgia against Louisville, to me, that is a really good game. I mean, Diana Evans, Olivia Cochran, Elizabeth Dixon going up against Jenna Statili. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Q Morrison, Gabby Conley. I just have Georgia. I think Georgia. What I saw out of Georgia when they played South Carolina, and how that was a really good duel. I look at Georgia a lot differently after that. So I have Georgia beating Louisville. When we go to UConn against Iowa, while Iowa is a high-powered team, like as far as scoring the ball, and you have Caitlin Clark, I just think that UConn is a better overall team. Not to mention, I think by this time they're going to get Jeannie Oriana back, or the coach back. I think that their entire team is better than Iowa's entire team. And because of that, their best player, which is, arguably Paige Buckners, I think. I apologize if I say your name wrong, but she's arguably their best player, and she doesn't have to score, even though she averages like 19 points a game. She doesn't have to score a lot for them to blow somebody out, because their team is just so complete. And it seems like they get better after, game after game. So I have UConn beating Iowa. And then you have Florida Gulf Coast against Baylor. I think Florida Gulf Coast, their run-ins here, like I said, Baylor just has a three-headed monster that I just don't. Baylor's men and women actually have a three-headed monster, now I think about it. But Baylor's three-headed monster to me is just gonna be too much for a Florida Gulf Coast. So because of that, I have Florida Gulf Coast losing to Baylor. And then going down, I have going down to the hemisphere, you have South Carolina against West Virginia. Again, South Carolina to me is, especially in this bracket until you get to their next opponent, I just think they're kind of leaps and bounds better than most teams. So because of that, I have South Carolina beating West Virginia. And then you have Maryland against UCLA. Maryland, to me, like I said, it's when you average damn near 92 points a game, that's tough to combat. Yeah, Maryland is not the greatest when it comes to defense, of course, but they score at a clip where you have to keep up with them. If you don't keep up, you're going to lose. And yes, I understand Maryland has those games. They have those lulls sometimes. Like sometimes they're in game. First of all, sometimes they lose games that they shouldn't have lost. And it's like they lost to Ohio State. I don't think they should have lost that. They lost to Missouri State. I don't think they should have lost that. But when they win, they be blowing people. Like they beat Arkansas by 19. They beat Michigan by 25 points. Like, I just don't think that UCLA will be able to keep up with Maryland. And while their defense isn't the best, you have to. It's kind of like Brooklyn Nets. Their defense isn't the best, but if you don't keep up with them scoring, you're going to lose, and you're going to lose bad. And I just don't think UCLA will be able to keep up scoring with them. So I have Maryland beating UCLA. And then go over to the Mercado. You have UNC against Gonzaga. That's pretty simple in my opinion. You have UNC. UNC is just, to me, a lot better than Gonzaga. So I have Gonzaga losing that game. And you have Rutgers against Texas A&M. I have Texas A&M winning. I think their size is going to be too much for Rutgers. So my Elite Eight is Stanford against Georgia, UConn against Baylor, South Carolina against Maryland, and NC State against Texas A&M. If we go to the Alamo, Stanford against Georgia, I think, like I said, this is when players start to shine a little more than the entire team. And to me, it's going to be a battle between Caleb Williams against Jenna Stalley and Gabby Conley against Haley Jones. Like, I just think that, while the stars are kind of lined up, like, you can kind of negate each star, seeing as though they both have pretty much the same, their stars kind of the same things. I think that Stanford, to me, is a better overall team than Georgia. So I have Stanford making it to my Final Four. Here's the big one. you have Baylor against Uconn. I think that while Uconn is a better overall team, it to me is going to be tough stopping Queen Ekbo, Johnny Carrington, and it's I have Baylor beating UConn. I think while Page can give you a bucket, while Kristen Williams can give you a bucket, while Olivia Nelson Aduda can give you a bucket, I just don't think that they'll be able to stop the inside presence that Baylor has. So I have Baylor beating UConn. Go down South Carolina against Maryland. This is tough, man. This is tough for me because you have the best offense against arguably one of the best defensive teams in the tournament, and I just think it's hard for me to look at Maryland and not see Brooklyn Nets. While no, they don't have a Kyrie Irving, they don't have a Kevin Durant, they don't have a James Harden, but they do have a Ashley Owuzo. They do have a Diamond Miller. They do have a Cleo Bibby. They do have a Caitlin Benzna. Those four right there can give you buckets and have been giving you, especially Ashley Owuzu. They'll give you buckets, and I think Maryland will beat South Carolina. It's tough for me to say, but I think Maryland will beat South Carolina. I love the coach Don Stanley. I love everything that South Carolina stands for. I love how important they are to women's college basketball, and I love how good they are. But I just think the scoring power that Maryland has is just going to be too much. And NC State against Texas A&M, I think the length of Texas A&M is going to be too much for NC State, especially when we talk about controlling the boards and controlling the paint. Not to mention, Texas A&M can definitely they can light you up from three, and as I understand that NC State can do that as well, but I have Texas A&M beating NC State. So my final four is Stanford, Maryland, Baylor, and Texas A&M. I'm gonna ride with it. I'm riding with it, and I'm not just saying this because I'm born and raised in Maryland. I got Maryland beating Stanford in the Final Four. Again, I've seen Maryland dog people, and I've seen they can shoot from they can dominate from the paint, they can dominate from the mid range, and they can dominate from three. They can dominate off turnovers, they can dominate fast breaks, they can dominate half court set. And again, they aren't the best. They're not the best defensive team in the nation, and it's not even close. I'll say they're a serviceable. They're a serviceable defensive team. They're okay. Like their defense ain't winning you much games, but they're okay. Their offense, however, puts them over the top. Their offense, to me, is an offense that I haven't seen. Even though, yes, they've lost twice, I haven't seen anybody really be able to slow down their offense. Their offense, the only time their offense has been bad is because they just miss. It's not because people are scheming against them. They just have off days. And because they won a Big Ten championship easily, by the way, for a reason. And I just have Maryland making it to the national championship. And I have them going against Baylor. I just think Nalisa Smith will carry them past Texas A&M. And I'm not saying carry because they suck or something. I have Baylor beating Texas A&M. And first time in a minute, but I have Maryland winning the national championship. I don't think that Baylor is able to stop a player like Ashley Owuzu. I just don't think that she. Not to mention, even if she's having an off day, You still have Diamond Miller, who can give you 10, 15, 20 points. You have Kalen Benzema. It's just, I just don't see, and they're greatly coached. I mean, Maryland basketball, especially on the women's side, have been at least one of the top ranked teams as long as I can remember. It's just there's sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. I mean, you have Tulliver when she played while back, they were good, and they've been consistently good. They just haven't, crossed over to that national champion in a minute. And I think that this will be the year. So I have Maryland winning the national championship. I think it's tough for me to see what I've seen offensively, and they don't win. So I have Maryland winning. What do you think? If you don't agree, leave it in the comments. Let me know. I would love to discuss it with you. The women's side starts tomorrow. I'm excited, and the men's side started 2 days ago. Like I said, and my bracket is already busted because I had Michigan State beating. I had Michigan State kind of going a little far I think I had them winning against UCLA and against whoever they were to play, but. Hey man, shouts out to UCLA. But like I said, those are my W women's college basketball bracket. Let me know what you think. Let's move forward. I'm not going to in detail describe what's happening with the Deshaun Watson and the lawsuits. I think maybe 7, 8 to 9 women have come out and said that he was being inappropriate to them towards massages and force. It's some inappropriate things that Deshaun Watson has done. Let me first start by saying this. I'm always on the side of women that feel inappropriate, they feel disrespected, they don't feel comfortable around people. I think that your job, if a woman that does not feel comfortable around you, is to check yourself and to change yourself. You know what I mean? Not saying, and even if you feel you can't change yourself, leave the situation. You don't, she didn't leave her house thinking that, you were going to disrespect her and this, that, or whatever like that. I just think that and it's not just women, if anyone feels disrespected around you, check yourself to see what are you doing to have them feel disrespected. That's first and foremost. Let me then say this. I've heard some of the reports. I've read some, well, not in detail, of course, but I've read some of what's being accused. Of course, I've seen what's going on in social media. I will say this. As an NFL quarterback, and I've heard Shannon Sharp say this, I've heard a lot of people say this. From what a lot of the reports say, he was asking them to massage around his groin area, in his lower extremities and stuff like that. I know as a quarterback, that's probably your lower extremity, especially your groin area, your hip area, is the most important place to be, to get massaged. Now, if I know one of the reports was saying forced oral sex, which is rape, and if that's the case, let me say this: if all of this is true, now I understand it's like a civil. It's not like ain't no charge been pressed or anything. If all of this is true, then shame on Deshaun Watson. I will come on here and I'm not gonna say bash, but I will come on here and express my sadness for not only the victims, but my sadness that Deshaun Watson did this, and I will come on here and defend anyone that this has happened to, if it is true. But there's a lot of things, and I'm not going to give my complete judgment of all this because I don't know the whole story. It's really none of my business, really none of anyone's business, except for the victims at hand, if there are victims, and Deshaun Watson. All I'll say is this: if this is not true, this just shows the level of seriousness that a team would go, or that a team or state or whatever would go to keep somebody on their roster. This is probably the first time in NFL history that a player this good, this young, and this important to winning has come out and said that I don't want to be on said team. And this is the first time, probably in NFL history, that wherever this player goes, except for maybe, one or two teams, like I don't think if he goes to Green Bay, there's a drastic difference. I don't think if he goes, in fact, I think there might be a downgrade if he went to Kansas City. I don't know if he'll be able, due to the scheme and everything that they run, I don't know if he'll be able to be successful in Baltimore due to, the scheme and how they built that offense around Lamar Jackson. But if this is not true, and this is just a ploy to keep him on the roster and to tarnish his name so that teams will back away from him, that is shame on the NFL and shame on the Houston Texans or the state of Houston or whatever. No, state of Texas or whatever. I will hold judgment until everything comes out and until we know definitively if he did it or if he didn't. All I'm going to say is if he did do it, shame on you, Deshaun Watson. If he didn't do it, shame on the people that went and said he did this inappropriate things. If he didn't do it, and shame on the people that are trying to throw dirt on his name. If he did not do it, that's an if. Because I'm all about protecting women, whether they're African American, whether they're any type of. I'm all about protecting people. So, I'm going to hold judgment to see exactly where all this comes out. I mean, a lot of it is, asking inappropriate things to masseuses. And if this is true, then, hey, shame on you, Deshaun Watson, if it's true. But then again, I understand no charges have been pressed. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know much about the court system like that. So I'm not an expert on that. I'm just saying I want to wait to see more come out. So moving forward. I wanted to end my show on two pretty positive stories. One of which is the HBCU, I guess the HBCU Hall of Fame or whatever, unveiled that they will be doing a Showcase Bowl starting 2022. The Showcase Bowl is kind of like the Senior Bowl that the NCAA does. It's going to showcase, people that are good enough to be in the NFL or draft prospects. They're going to pretty much have their bowl. And I love that because, we don't get a lot of, especially HBCUs. Again, I know I went to a HBCU. You don't really get a lot of love, especially when we talk about draft picks. I played against people, to me, that are good enough to be in the NBA. I've had people on my team that I felt were good enough to at least be in a G League or NBA. And a lot of those players, because they go to HBCUs and because you don't have the nation watching like you do at a Duke or North Carolina, you don't really get to, especially football. Now, of course, we know Jackson State is getting a lot of love and shine. And North Carolina A&T gets a lot of shine because they're incredible in football. But outside of those schools, you don't really see a lot of HBCUs get to shine outside of the MEAC championship and stuff like that. I think this is great because it just shows, prospects, and it shows recruiters of these NFL teams how good these players are. And I think that it's very important to get more light on things that African Americans are doing. So shouts out to HBCU. I think it's called the Legacy Bowl. I'm just excited to see them showcase, and I'm excited to see more players from HBCUs get drafted both in the NBA, NFL, whatever draft. I'm just excited to see that. And shouts out to the HBCUs for putting on the Legacy Bowl. I think it's gonna. I don't remember where it's gonna be held. I just know that it starts in 2022. So shouts out to them. And lastly, before we go, a report came out, or it was confirmed that LeBron James, who is part of an ownership group or whatever, is now part owner of the Boston Red Sox. I'm not gonna have this debate, of course, because this debate will go on from time and time. But I'm not here to have a debate about who is the greatest basketball player is, or who is the greatest athlete ever. But I will say this. LeBron James, to me, does everything right as far as on and off the court. He has a school. He's very vocal when it comes to social injustice. He's very vocal when it comes to things that just aren't right. He's very vocal, and he uses his status and social platform to spread awareness on things instead of, bash people or whatever. And he does things like this. He does things that you wouldn't expect athletes to do, especially athletes that are still playing. The stigma is, athletes are stupid, or athletes are only good at whatever sport they do, or athletes don't know much outside of sports. And LeBron James, to me, and of course it's not just him, but LeBron James right now is changing the way that we see athletes. The way that he's still one of the best, if not the best player in the NBA currently, and he's doing so much stuff off the court. Shouts out to him and his team. I am not having the debate, is right now at least, if LeBron James is better than blank in basketball terms. But I will say this. LeBron James is carving his way into being one of the most, if not the most, important athlete we have ever seen. I'm not discrediting anything that anyone else has done, but LeBron James has been and is one of the most important athletes we have ever had walking the face of this earth. From how important and how he shines a light on social issues, how he shines a light on his community, and he improves his community, and how he just carries himself. He is a very influential and very important athlete. And I just kudos and shouts out to you, LeBron James, for now being partial owner of a baseball team, the Boston Red Sox. Shouts out to you, man. And there you have it, man. That has been this week's episode, or Saturday's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. Please subscribe to wherever you're listening. Please come to the YouTube if you're not here to watch the visuals. It definitely mean a lot. I will see you guys on Tuesday. I'm having fun doing this. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know how you're doing with the NCAA tournament. I'm excited. This is like the best time of year, especially when we talk about basketball. And yeah, man. Until next time, much love.